We asked what a supernatural event that happened in your life that just cannot be explained. I was very young, probably 7 to 8 years old. My mother had gone to the store and left me alone. This is early 80s in small town Mississippi, y'all. It was a different time. It had to be Saturday morning because I was watching cartoons and I heard a knock on their front door. We did not have a window or a peephole, and it's a small town nowhere in Mississippi. So I opened the door and there's an elderly man standing there bleeding from the head. He was wearing these thick gold Coke bottle glasses, a bright red sleeve shirt with a pocket protector, blue jeans and a belt buckle that had Eddie engraved on its big letters. He said he was in a car accident down the road and if I could please call the police and fire department since his wife was trapped in the car. I told him to come and sit down on our couch. He did, and I shut the door. I went into the kitchen and called our local police department and told them about the accident. When they asked where the accident happened, I realized I did not know. So I yelled to the man, "Hey, what road did this happen on?" I got no answer. I told the police to hold on. I walked into the living room and the man was gone, like a gust of the wind. I did not hear our squeaky door, so I knew he did not leave. There was still an imprint on the couch from where he had been sitting. I looked in my bathroom to see if maybe he's gone there to wash the blood off of his head. He wasn't there. I looked in my bedroom and my mom's bedroom. Nothing. When I came back to the phone, I told the police operator that he was gone and I don't know how he left. I gave them my address and the police and fire department came to my home. I told them about what happened, what the man had been wearing, everything. The police searched the area and found nothing. They talked to my neighbors who said they did not hear anything or see anything, or no man that matched that description. By this time, my mom got back home, and I got in trouble for making a false police call. Months later, when I got off the school bus one afternoon, there were police cars everywhere at my home. A detective was waiting inside with my mom and said he wanted to ask me some questions about the phone call I made about the man asking for help a few months previously. When I told him the story again and gave him the man's description, he just sat there, staring at me, open-mouthed. He thanked me for my time, told me I was not in any trouble, and then gave me a police officer teddy bear. They talked to my mom for a bit and left. After they have been gone for a few minutes, my mom called me back into the dining room and sat down at the table and told me the police had found the car driven off the road less than a mile from our house and found 2 bodies inside. One was thought to be a male and the other female. The car completely destroyed and upside down, about 60 yards off the road in a very rural and heavy wooded area, which is why it took them so long to find them. The body thought to be male was wearing the exact same clothes I described. Both of them were pinned inside the car, upside down, both still wearing their seatbelts. My family and friends treated me really weird for a long time. One night, I woke up to a weird feeling and saw an opaque silhouette of a little boy standing on the other side of the apartment facing me. I turned on my light and it was gone. When I turned my light off, I saw it again. I flipped the light back on, went over there to make sure there was nothing that could be causing a weird shadow. There was nothing there that could have created that specific shape, and it was standing in the pathway between my couch and the wall, so it couldn't have been my shadow. I turned my light off again and it was there, flipped it back on, and slept with the light for the rest of the night. I couldn't sleep without the light on for days. Early into my now wife and I relationship, I had a dream about her and a childbirth. Very vivid and long, like I spent days in the hospital with her and everything was in a strange twilight. When it came time to deliver, things went very wrong, and she and the baby ended up passing away. I woke up quite shook naturally but brushed it off. I am a nurse and have to deal with traumatic OB situations before. I chalked it up to me dealing with that stress through a dream. 6 years later, and my wife is pregnant. I have forgotten the dream by now. I get a call late into the 3rd trimester while I'm on a shift. Wife's going to the ER for a bad BP. I get off my shift and go to meet her. As soon as I step into the room, I remember my dream. It's the same damn room, which is extra spooky because the hospital we were at wasn't even built when I had the dream. This is the last year right when lockdown started. My wife is admitted and they want to wait a week to deliver if possible. She will be kept in a twilight state until that time. So, it's me in this room, eerily isolated as the world around us is frozen, and my wife is incoherent mere feet away. Lingering for days in this room, I brushed off my dream, trying to manage my anxiety and stress. Come showtime, my wife gets ready to begin pushing, and it's exactly the same scenario as my dream. Things start going poorly, but the doctor thinks delivery is still possible. At this point, I finally freak out into a full panic and demand a C-section for my wife. The doctor, I can tell, wants to argue, but I think my outburst made her step back and reassess the situation, and she made the call, emergency C-section. It took 10 minutes for me to get taken back as I'm in the operating room. I see my baby come out lifeless. They do everything they can and manage to resuscitate her. In the meantime, my wife is doing poorly and they're scrambling to control her bleeding. I follow the baby out knowing there's really nothing I can do. Baby gets life-flighted to another hospital, but before we go, I see my wife stable and headed to the ICU. Both my wife and baby are critical but alive. Today, they're both thriving and my baby's 16 months and just a tornado of energy. I don't know that they would be alive if not that dream, and causing me to freak out and demand a change in the plan. I grew up in a very rural area, mostly crop farms everywhere. About a mile from my parents' house, there was this old abandoned farmhouse that all the kids said was haunted. They would sneak into the house after dark, all the typical stupid kid crap, but I believe there are things in this world better left alone and never went. Years pass. The house fell into disrepair and was eventually torn down, leaving an old weathered barn. Well, I make a little side money selling photos of abandoned places, so I wanted to take a picture of the barn. I parked on the road and was walking up the drive. I made it about 10 feet before I could just not walk any further. My feet would not move forward. My adrenaline spiked and I burst into tears. I turned back and ran to my car. I did not feel safe until I got past a nearby creek you have to cross to get there. I let it go. But a few months later, we had to drive past the property after having Christmas dinner with my parents, and there was a creature standing in the drive. It reminded me of the fawn from Pan's Labyrinth. Just super tall with a wide head and horns of antlers, but the eyes were more on the side of the head. Again, adrenaline kicked in and I burst into tears, but I was trying to keep it together because I did not want to freak out my kids. My husband asked if I was okay. I just said, "You saw that, right?" "Yep." "Was it human?" "Nope." I refused to drive that road ever again. When I was a kid, about 10 to 12, I was carrying a load of laundry upstairs home alone while Mom was out doing errands. We have this weird carpet runner over our hardwood stairs that only really attached to the top of the flight, but otherwise not fitted or secured to each individual stair. So naturally, I stepped on an air bubble of carpet with my vision obscured by the laundry and fell backwards while bear hugging a bunch of blankets. I specifically remember thinking, "Welp, guess I'm about to die." While almost airborne with just my big toe left on the carpet, I felt two hands, one on each side of my shoulder blades, give me a firm shove that launched me back up to the step and diagonally against the stair rail. I assume Mom somehow silently came back early without announcing herself and turned around to thank her while still clinging onto the rail. But no one was there. I scurried upstairs to put my things down while calling her name, walking the house afterwards to check if any doors were unlocked or if her car was even there. I finally resorted to calling her cell, where she told me she was hitting up a few more stores. It still feels like there's a presence on that stairwell, like someone's watching, but in a protective way rather than sinister. Working as night security for a small office at a sanitation plant, Building was a single entrance and you had to check in at the security station to get in or out. A worker shows up and checks in saying he needs to take care of a few things and grab some stuff. So I check his ID and flip a few lights for him, then go back to my business. Fast forward a few hours and my shift is about to end. I still haven't seen the guy come back, so I patrol the building to find him and I literally cannot find him anywhere. He's not in any of the areas I turn lights on for him. No other lights are on, and he's not in any of the rooms. I stop by security to see if we just missed each other and he's trying to leave, but no one's there. I do a second patrol and still no signs. At this point, I went to check cameras to see where he went, but he's not on a single camera except the one covering the entrance and the security station. He turns down a hallway and never shows up on the next camera down the hall. At this point, I logged it as an incident and GTFO right as the relief shift showed up. Next day, my boss calls me and says that that worker had been on vacation out of state for several days and would not return for several more. Nobody could offer any explanation to what happened. Apparently, we lived with a benign spirit in our house for 3.5 years. This is my mother's account of what happened because my sister and I did not see anything at the time. Only my brother, his best friend, and my mother saw it. Back when we were living in South Africa, we moved into an apartment which we had bought. The move was actually quite eventful because a mother and her son were renting the place before, and although they've been notified, they decided to stay past the date that was given to them. I'm not really sure the details as I was around 7 or 8. Long story short, we moved in and started settling. After putting us to bed, my mother decided to stay up and watch TV. My brother was out with his friends. As she's watching whatever show was on at the time, she glances to our only plant in the house, which is about 1.5 meters tall, and sees a man roughly the same height as the plant standing under one of the leaves. Noping out of that crap, she gets up and flicks on the light. He's not there. Calling it a night, she goes to bed. The next day, or maybe 2 days later, at breakfast, my brother, who was around 16 at the time, picked up a piece of bread, turned around to the plant and said, "Hey Michael, want some?" laughing. My mother asked him, "Who is Michael?" And he says, "Michael's the guy standing under the plant at night." Mind you, my mother did not say anything to anyone about Michael, just to not freak us out. My brother's best friend was also over that morning. We basically unofficially adopted him, and my mother asked him if he sees Michael too, and he says yes. She then asked him to describe Michael, and he gives a perfect description down to the whites in his eyes. Michael apparently was a black young man around 1.4 meters in height, wearing plain black trousers, a white button-down shirt, and a green vest. His skin tone was quite dark with a faint sheen to it. His eyes also dark in valor, and the whites were tainted a bit yellow. He had a permanent smiling expression in his face that did not reach his eyes. He stayed put where he was, never moving but following you with those eyes. One morning, my mom woke up to my dad coming home, who bought this indoor circulating water thing. I don't really know what they're called. He moved the plant exactly opposite to where it was, next to the couch, and put the water thing there instead. My mother did not say anything, and that night, Michael also moved with the plant. Of course, after hearing this, I asked the next logical question that any sane person would ask. Why the duck did she not throw away the plant? She said it never occurred to her, so yeah. That's the story of Michael and that benign smile spirit that was a part of our family for some time. This happened years ago when I was a teenager, but I remember wanting to sleep in my guest room really badly for a few nights. I chalked it up to being a bigger bed and a cooler room, which was nice during the hot summer days, but for 3 straight nights, I would wake up at 3 a.m. to a tap on the window and a super bright light pouring in through the blinds, and each night I said, "No, no, go away, don't come inside," and then roll over to sleep. After the second night, I told myself to get up and investigate to see what the light was. But on the third night, I woke up with a powerfully intense feeling like I absolutely need to stay in bed. And repeat the phrase again, however, instead of rolling over to go to sleep, I stayed still to see what would happen. I then saw the lights wave like it understood what I said and was waving goodbye. And then the lights disappeared. It never happened again after that. To this day, I hate myself for not getting up and looking out that window to see what sort of alien thing was tapping on my window. I got my driver's license at 22 years old and was a nervous driver. One summer in 2014, my parents were going to our family beach house with my and the time toddler son. I was going to meet them there following Saturday morning as I had work. At the time, I was driving a beat-up 2000 Chevy Cavalier with no air conditioning, and my cigarette lighter was broken, so I could not charge my GPS system in the car. I also did not have a smartphone at the time, so I figured I would charge my GPS overnight and it would survive the hour-and-a-half drive to the family beach house. What I did not take in account for, due to being a freshly licensed driver, was that Saturday morning traffic on the New Jersey Garden State Parkway in the summer is a ducking nightmare. I also have an absolutely awful sense of direction and can be a bit anxious when I get lost. I left my house around 8 in the morning and texted my parents that I would be at the beach house around 10 the latest, and that I would take the baby to the beach when I got there. By 10:45, I was sitting in dead stop traffic, sweating my butt off as there was no breeze. The GPS suggested I take a different exit than I normally would, and I jumped at the chance to get off the parkway. Whatever exit it wanted me to take also brought me to a more dead stop traffic. At this point, my GPS was about to die and I had no idea where I was going. I did not even have a bottle of water on me. Around 12:30, I was driving through random towns with no idea where I was, covered in sweat, and my GPS had been dead for hours. I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I called my parents, who had no idea where I was, and they suggested I stop somewhere to ask for directions. But when I did find a fire station, no one was there. I went back to my car utterly defeated and burst into tears. I did not know what to do and was half afraid I would never find my way home. I thought of my late uncle, who was also a limo driver and the namesake of my son. I was sure he probably knew exactly where I was due to taking teenagers down the shore every year after their proms. I looked up to the ceiling of my car and cried, "Hey Uncle C, I'm lost and afraid, and I have to get to the baby. Where the hell am I?" All of a sudden I heard the mechanical voice of the GPS say, "At the stop sign, make a right." I looked down at the GPS and saw it was no longer dead. It wasn't fully on either. Instead, it was showing a map of the main menu. It was just a blank, white screen, and it repeated at me,
"At the stop sign, make a right."
I figured I had maybe a minute or so before it died again, so I went to the stop sign and made the right. The GPS directed me for the next half an hour to the front of my family's beach house. As soon as I parked the car, instead of the typical, "You've reached your destination," the GPS usually said, it just said,
"Goodbye."
And I never heard it say that again. My family and I are convinced that my uncle helped me find my way through the GPS. And yes, I got a smartphone the same year for Christmas, so I would always have access to GPS. My house growing up had a set of stairs. You walked up which made a 90-degree turn to the left. It led to our game room. Across the room was the door to my bedroom. My bed was positioned right across from my doors, so when I was laying in bed at night, my doorway looked like a black hole if I had my door open. We also had a baby gate at the bottom of the stairs, so my little brother could not climb up. Whenever you tried to step over the gate, your foot would tap it because it was pretty tall. I was laying in bed one night playing on my GBA around 3 a.m. I heard the tap of the baby gate, then someone walking up the stairs. I was expecting my mom rushing up the stairs to tell me I was up too late, but nothing. I heard the steps coming up the stairs and then they stopped. I said, "Mom? Dad?" No response. I then tried my other brother's name, not the toddler obviously, but nothing. I just kind of sat there sweating. I then jumped up and turned on my lamp and there was no one in the game room. I had no interest in going downstairs to investigate, so I shut my door and went to sleep. I asked my mom the next morning and she said it was not her or my dad. So I went to ask my brother and that's when I found out he was at a friend's house that night. I never knew what it was and it still creeps me out. When I was an older teenager, everyone in the house had just gone to sleep. It was around midnight and me and my sister always slept with our bedroom door open. I had a clear view of the kitchen table from my bedroom since it was the first bedroom leading away from the living room. All the lights were off and it was pitch black, so I could not see a thing. As I drifted off to sleep, the clean, unmistakable sound of a kitchen chair sliding across the kitchen floor jolted me awake. I was terrified to look into the kitchen from my bed. My dad got up right away and came down to the hall in his tighty-whities and turned on the light to investigate. Think Harry, beer belly, blue-collar redneck. And there was no one in the kitchen. We were all in bed, including the dogs. The sound woke everyone up. All we could really do was go back to sleep and hope the rest of the night was quiet. Another time in the same house, I was going into the kitchen, again close to midnight, to put a glass in the sink. There was a window above the sink that had one of those solid pull-down blind shades. As I got to the sink, the blind suddenly went flying up and rolled onto itself. I flew out of the kitchen at lightning speed. Once, when my boyfriend was leaving to go home, I was around 20 or 21, again, around midnight. We tiptoed to the front door in the darkness and I was telling him bye. And the disc tray and the DVD player in the living room opened and closed a few times. With both of us stood there wide-eyed staring at it, he was like, "Well, I guess I gotta go," and left. I sprinted back to my room. I'm fully convinced the house has something bad in it, and it's always felt very evil. I lived there from the time I was 10 until 23. I used to have horrific nightmares about something evil being in the walk-in closet of the master bedroom. In my dreams, it was always a big black shadow mass that's trying to drag me into the closet, and I would be frantically trying to escape it in slow motion, or it would be hovering next to the foot of my bed, slowly inching towards me. The terror I felt in those dreams were almost real, and I couldn't stand to be in or near that closet for more than a few minutes at a time. I always had the overwhelming feeling to run if I was around it too long. I had to start sleeping with the lamp on when I got to be 19 because I was always sleeping in a state of fright. And to this day, at 31, I'm scared to sleep alone in complete darkness. But the dreams basically stopped when I moved out. Neither of my parents could stand to sleep in the master bedroom for longer than a few months at a time. My dad swears that one night, while he was sleeping in there alone, my mom started sleeping in the living room at this point, that he felt the blankets tug off on one side of him. So, when he rolled over to see what it was, he heard a voice in his ear on the other side whisper, "Liar, liar, liar, liar." He did not spend the rest of the night there. Years later, my parents gave sleeping in there another try for a few months, and my baby niece was living with us. There was a crib for her at the foot of my parents' bed, and my dad said he woke up and saw the shape of my niece sitting up in her crib in the darkness, and he went to nudge my mom awake to tell her to get the baby, but my mom had already taken my niece into the living room, and neither of them were in the room. My dad basically hightailed it out of there and the baby-shaped shadow was gone. My brother claims that he had sleep paralysis episode of something sitting on his chest and strangling him, which was odd to me because I remember when we first moved in the house, I briefly slept in my brother's room, and I had the most peaceful dream at 10 years old that I was in a beautiful, sunny, and very green, lush forest, and there was an intense feeling of peace washing over me. And in my dream, I had the understanding that God was with me and everything was okay. I used to hang out in my brother's room and play games with him, and not once was I ever spooked or afraid in there. Now only my dad lives in the house. My parents are separated and he sleeps in the literal diagonal opposite end of the house from the master bedroom closet. He turned the den right by the front door into his bedroom, and his bed is the furthest corner of the room. He spends all his time at home reading the Bible and making his own ammo. My boyfriend, same one, jokes around every now and then that maybe my dad will give us the house one day, and my response is always, heck no, I don't want to live there. It's haunted. I hope you all enjoyed today's scare. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another unexplained or downright freaky story. Bye for now.